Hi everyone, welcome to Wandering DMs. I'm Paul.
And I'm Dan, and on this special episode of Wandering DMs, I'm going to be interviewing Paul over his recent trip to Totalcon, the largest gaming convention in New England, and generally our first convention of the season. Welcome, Paul. We'll talk about that today and a bunch of more things today on Wandering DMs.
Thanks, Dan. Pleasure to be here. Um, Before we get into that, I just want to remind everybody that after the show, there is, as usual, our after party chat, which is available to our patrons via our private Discord server. It's accessible over all levels of patronage. So if you would like to join that, please go check out patreon.com/wanderingdms, sign up, and you'll get an invite to come join us.
Yeah, we'll look forward to that.
I unfortunately won't be at the after party chat today. As some of you can probably hear, I've got a bit of a frog in my throat. Definitely feeling a little run down post convention here, and just trying to muscle through. So I'll be sipping my tea and trying my best.
And letting the drugs sink in. Exactly. I put in a promotion that we were probably going to talk about, what games we're going to play, how to prepare for a con. You and I are very busy guys. How to prepare for a con when you get maybe you get yanked into one with a friend at last minute, and how to prepare for that, and how to hopefully avoid the dreaded con crud. And our first comment from the day comes from Kevin Thompson, and I think people are agreeing with this. Kevin says, "Never touch your face before washing your hands first. That's how you beat con crud." I'm going to assume that Paul is a pretty hygienic guy, so I'm going to assume Paul was doing that anyway, and missed his save nonetheless.
I don't know. There's a lot of stuff going around out there these days, and given that it's already showing up here on Sunday and I only went to the con on Friday, it's probably likely that I was brewing something before I even left my house. But who knows? Who knows about these things?
But hard to say.
I don't know. Yeah. It is interesting, frankly, because I missed conventions for a long time due to the pandemic. And then a lot of conventions have attempted to implement various safety protocols, and some of those are now falling to the wayside, but some of them are hanging on. It is an interesting and unusual issue, I think, that is present at conventions now.
So what I read on the Totalcon website is that their current protocols is everything's entirely voluntary. Is that people can mask at their discretion. No one's allowed to bother anybody in either direction on their choice. I did say that they had an option for game masters to opt for their table to be mask required, which I think was an interesting choice. How many tables did you see take that option?
Incredibly few, I would say. I wouldn't say that masks were not present, and I saw certainly individuals opting into masks, but I can't say I ever looked around and saw a table of gamers where everyone was masked. I don't know. My gut says that DMs who would prefer that are probably just not showing up.
I can see that. It's clearly, culturally here in New York, it is certainly going by the wayside. I think we'll see a few more on like public transportation, like the trains a little bit more, but the majority of people are not doing that anymore. And it's a reasonable choice at this point.
Yeah. Anyway, that aside, the other interesting angle of this convention for me that I think we're going to talk about is that I was late in preparing myself to go to this convention. So late that I had missed all of the deadlines, literally all of them. I missed the opportunity to sign up to run games, and I was late enough to the point of signing up to play games that pretty much all the games I wanted to play were already sold out. So I showed up with a hotel room and a badge, and that's it.
So I feel that, first of all, I'd like to say I just realized what you have on your shirt there, Paul. So you picked a thematic shirt of The medieval
There you
mass doctor, which I just picked up on as we got off that issue. So well done as
Yeah.
always, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you. I will say that it was 100% intentional, and I was totally aware of what shirt I was wearing before you said that. Yeah.
So I think this well done. So I think this part of the show is tips for the lazy conventioneer.
Yeah. Well, and I would say not just the lazy, but the new, because
Right.
this is actually interesting.
Yes.
While I was at the convention, met up with a friend of mine who was talking to a couple who I guess I assumed were friends from outside the gaming convention circles, but maybe they're just strangers that he just met and befriended. I don't know. But the point was, they were brand new, never been to a convention before in their lives. Had just walked in and were like, "This seems fun. What do we do?" And and I happened to be walking down the hall as he was standing there talking to them, and he said, "Oh, this is great. Paul comes to this thing all the time. I haven't been in years and years. This is my first time back. I bet Paul has advice." And turned to me and asked, "What's your advice?" So yeah, so for folks who are like me and maybe a little slow in signing up, or folks who are brand new, I think there's definitely advice for how to wing it, right? How to still have a good time when you don't really know what the hell you're getting yourself into.
I think that's a common way that people get into conventions. They get wrangled by a friend. Probably is the most common thing to do. I've gone to once or twice. I've gone to a brand new convention, totally solo and alone, which I think is very unusual. But
Yeah.
always the outlier, never the bride.
A lot probably depends on the size of the convention too, because I find that conventions have very different vibes based on their size. Now, Totalcon is probably one of the biggest ones here in New England, but is still capping out in the low thousands, maybe 1 to 2,000 attendees, I would say, at a rough guess. And then on the other hand, you have stuff like PAX or Gen Con or Origins, where you're talking about tens of thousands, right? I think Gen Con is well above 60,000 at this point. PAX Unplugged is probably similar in size. I don't know that there's a lot between them. I know I feel like I heard a few years back that Gary Con had numbers close to say 8,000, which is maybe puts it kind of in the middle of that pack. Mm-hmm. But I think much more likely you're going to see 1,000 or less. There's plenty of those kinds of conventions that are maybe measuring in the hundreds to very low thousands, and then there's your giant PAX and Gen Cons, which are massive. I guess since my experience recently was with Totalcon, we should talk about conventions that size. And the major difference in my mind is just the level of community on display, right? And I think that, here's an interesting thing I saw at the convention this year that I felt like is becoming more common. I saw a lot of groups who were existing roleplay groups who play online regularly and were using the convention as a method to all get together in physical space and have a kind of reunion of sorts of, oh my gosh, we're going to actually all play together in real life.
Wow. I mean, of course. And I also never thought of that ever before. What an amazing phenomenon. Wow.
Yeah. I saw multiple groups doing that. And I was like, there you go. And I get that vibe generally from Totalcon and other conventions of that size around here, especially after you've gone many years. You start to meet people and know people, and it becomes this kind of community experience, right? It's as much about the gaming as it is about hanging out at the bar after.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
How did that work? I mean, when you saw people doing that were playing predominantly online and getting like one opportunity to see them, how did it go? Because in my life, I've had one or two or three friends that were online friends, and like online we were like really tight and we had great chemistry, I'd say, by emails and text. And then maybe like half the time when we got together in person, it was very awkward. And it's kind of embarrassing to say that, but it was like, now we don't know how to actually deal with each other in person. So how did that look like that actually went?
I mean, from my perspective, it looked like it went very well. But I would say that there's a common thread of all the groups I saw doing it, which was that most of them were playing online not because that's how they met, but because that's how they were forced to evolve. Whether that's because the pandemic came along and suddenly everyone has to play online, or we used to all play online together and then people started moving away and we said, hey, we can still play together by just going online. And that latter, I think, is a much stronger argument for the convention reunion, because now you've got people who are scattered about, right? Who can't possibly, like, even despite whatever pandemic precautions you are not taking, you know, it's just physically impossible for us to get together on a weeknight because somebody lives in New York and somebody lives in Massachusetts and somebody lives in, Florida or whatever. Right. Just
Definitely.
scattered.
Definitely. My alternate week gaming group on Friday is totally in that exact situation of one or two people that are distant and kind of like to get together once, but then that would leave out the person that dials in. So yeah, we kind of have exactly that issue.
Yeah. So yeah, I saw plenty of that, and that all seemed to go very well. And it's just amusing to see that happen, right? Because it's like the convention is almost irrelevant at that point. It's just an excuse. It's an excuse for those people to be there. But sorry, this is getting very rambly, Dan, but I was talking to somebody about what the value of conventions are, and they were saying that one of their favorite things about conventions, going to gaming conventions, is the vibe, the feeling that all the people have arrived here to set aside their other lives, to set aside all the stresses and all the daily routines and everything else, and just focus on play. I'm here to play, right? I'm here to play, and I'm promoting that. I'm prioritizing that above everything else. I'm putting all the rest of life on hold, and I'm going to prioritize the next 2 or 3 days on play. And
that's deep. That's really deep.
Yeah, right?
Give me some of that.
Well, so here's a funny thing that I see at conventions, like I said, especially the smaller ones, right, where there is this community aspect to it, right? Like I said, at Totalcon, the gaming times, right, they break it up into specific blocks of time. So you have your morning games from 8 to noon, and you have like an afternoon game from like 1 to 5. You have an evening game from, say, 7 to 11. And those are 4-hour blocks, which you need for an RPG. Maybe those get broken in half for 2 2-hour blocks if you're playing board games or something lighter, something faster. But still, the gaming ends at 11, and then you're in a hotel and there's a hotel bar, so people go and hang out there, right? And the interesting thing about the social aspect of a gaming convention is that there's an immediate topic, right? A very present topic. It's very easy to have like you don't have to fall into like really painfully bad small talk, because you can just and I see many conversations just ignited with, what'd you play today? What are you playing tomorrow? What are you looking forward to next? Right? And then it just boom, it just goes from there. And everyone has that context. Everyone has that. We are here to game. We've been gaming. Let's talk about gaming.
Fantastic. I'm going to answer. Let me answer a question that Joshua threw in the chat here a minute ago. So Joshua was asking, with my little experience, am I saying awkward just at first or ongoing? Because I've had friendships where we just haven't seen each other for a while, and it starts out awkward, and then maybe it gets better in the in-person interaction. And I'll say, Josh, that both. My sample size is small, but I've had both. I've had at least one person that I was very confused by. Really, how bright we were in emails. We were just like really riffing on each other, and then in person we were like, "Hey, So it's 1 or 2 data points. It's not many data points. Possibly I've met some viewers of the show right now, and hopefully I was sufficiently hospitable when I meet folks in person, because I feel bad if I'm weird. Offline.
I want to talk a little bit about that the thrust of the topic that we've been hinting at that we haven't really gotten to here, right? Which is like, we talked a lot of, or we opened talking about like, how do you make the most out of a convention when you come unplanned? So there's a lot of different things, right? So there's let me talk about like the couple that I talked to, and they said, we're here. We have no idea what we're doing. What do we do? And so the first thing I asked them was like, well, what do you like? What are you here for? Right? Because there's a lot of stuff at conventions. Do you like board games? Do you like role-playing games? Do you like competitive stuff? Do you Are you looking to be
Yes.
exposed to new games you've never played before? Are you looking to connect with new people? Like, what is it you want out of your convention? And maybe you don't know. Maybe you hadn't really thought about this stuff. So here are some things that are available. Most conventions, I don't know that people realize this, but most conventions that I go to, and certainly anything organized by Tabletop Events, because they have a whole feature around this, have what they call a board game library. And I've seen this at PAX and Total and Rising Phoenix and a whole bunch of conventions, which is basically to say there's a huge shelves full of all kinds of different board games, and anyone can go up at any time and show their badge, and they get a little scan, and they say, they scan your badge and they scan the little code on the game, and you can borrow a game, right? It's totally free. It's library like. Borrow any game off the shelf, sit down and play it. So if you're there with a couple of friends and you got, I even did this. I used the board game library when I was there because I had another couple of friends who also hadn't filled their schedule or had spare time. I did it in the morning, frankly, on I think on was it Friday morning, Saturday? Anyway, it doesn't matter. I did it in the morning in a time when I don't like to get up for that 8 a.m. time slot. That's a little early for me, especially when I'm out past midnight, hanging out, socializing the night before. But like the next game slot doesn't start till 1, so often I find I have this chunk of time from like, I don't know, 10 to noon where I'm like, what do I do? So got together with a couple of friends and just went and like checked out a game from the board game library and sat down and played a game for a little bit. It's a nice option.
Nice.
Yeah. So that exists. There's usually an exhibit hall, right, where dealers are and they're selling stuff, but that's you can browse around there, and it's more stuff than you're going to get at any individual game store because there's many of them and they're selling all kinds of interesting stuff. So that can be entertaining. And then there's the actual scheduled games, which again, if you didn't pre-plan, it's highly likely that all the games you would want to play are full. Right? You probably already missed out. That is definitely an issue at conventions, but I would say that doesn't mean don't go to them. One of the things I did is go to a table at a time where the schedule says this game is running, and just ask the GM, do you have space? Usually there's some mechanic there for them to let you into the game if there's room. Now, there might not be, so you got to be prepared for having to walk away. But there might be room. Here's another tactic. Another interesting thing I did is I brought with me several games that were easy to play on the fly. Right, I had a couple board games, a couple light RPGs. I brought Cheat Your Own Adventure. I brought Fiasco. I brought is some other. Oh, I brought Jason Morningstar's new game Desperation, which are all nice, easy games that I don't require a lot of prep from me, but I can still facilitate them running. And they're also easy to kind of accordion the number of people at the table. Right, both Cheat Your Own Adventure and Desperation play with 2 people or 6 people, no big deal. And the interesting thing is I had those, kind of in my pocket. That's another nice thing, especially if they're small and fit in your bag, right? Easy to chuck in your bag. So I was there, and I would show up to a game that I'm like, I want to fall into this game. I hope there's extra space. But in some cases, those games are so popular, I'm not the only one trying to do that. And so maybe you show up at a table, and for the 6 spaces at the table, there's 10 people showing up. And then I can offer, well, I can take, the group of folks, the extras. Hey, everyone who's also there's no room for, let's go sit at another table and play something else.
I know that you've had, good success with that. I've seen you have success with that at other conventions in the past, which is, I guess, to me, impressive. I guess. Some cons have flagging implements for games that can accept additional players. Remind me if they do that at Totalcon.
They do. I don't know how well it's used, right? They do have these little stands you can put at your table that have like a green sign that says looking for players or a red sign that says table full. So in theory, you can go around and look for those. I would say they're more used in board gaming events than RPGs.
Okay.
I think there's plenty of people that sit down to run their RPGs and don't even notice the little flag thing. And
right. I feel it's one of those things where every single DM needs to know about it in order to make use of it, and it's kind of scattershot how many game runners are aware of what that's for.
I think as the person showing up without, without anything going on, I guess you have to show up in sort of this mindset of like not being married to anything, right? Because good chance you're not going to get into this game. Don't panic, right? Prioritize the one you want to play. Have some backup things ready to go. I guess it's important to point out for folks who are not used to going to conventions that most conventions also have what they call open gaming tables, which is to say just empty tables that are not assigned to any game that anyone can just sit down and use for whatever they want. So that usually exists, and that is important for stuff like, I've got, the three of us are, there was a point where I had actually four of us who had all showed up to a table of Fiasco that were above the number of people the game could take. And so we walked off and we played a board game at an open gaming table.
Great. Cool.
Yeah. So.
Now, at those open gaming tables, I mean, what license do they use nowadays? Are they using the OGL or Creative Commons or ORC or something else?
It's completely Wild West, Dan. No documentation whatsoever. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Wow. Okay. Well, the lawyers must be having a day.
I know. Buyer beware.
So how is go ahead.
Yeah. I would say also, and here's another point of advice is go to the registration table, talk to the people there, talk to the people you're meeting, right? Even if you land in a game, ask people, what else are you playing? Try to find out what other things are going to have open space, because there are some games that are just very easily will take more people. For example, on both Friday night and Saturday night in the miniatures room of Totalcon, there is a big Car Wars game, and it always has room. I've never seen anyone get turned away from that game. I've seen 25 people play that game. I think I played that game on Friday night, and there was maybe 12 of us, and 8 more people could have showed up, and it would have been fine.
Nice.
Which is not something you can say about like a lot of games, right? 8 more people can't show up to a table of Fiasco and be like, yeah, sure, let's all play, right? It's not going to work. But the only reason that you're going to know about that stuff, though, and know which games are like that, I think, is to ask around, and you'll get people to tell you, there's a Car Wars game. You can drop that, no problem.
Coincidentally, I was on a gaming forum the other day, a miniatures forum, actually getting advice about lead rot and stuff. And the little sidebar was like interesting stories that are also happening at the moment. And someone had a photo of, like a couple of Matchbox Hot Wheels cars with the caption, took a photo from a large game about miniature fighting cars. And I'm like, do you mean Car Wars? Because I feel like you ought to know what that is. I could be biased, but I'm like, that is a really classic game. And it's like, some sort of game where you use cars and it's like they're fighting for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. There's stuff like that. I know that last night. So the other thing I do, sorry, it's a bit of a tangent, but the other thing I'll do is I did, like, as a GM, I will bring an RPG that I'm ready to run on the off chance that I can gather enough folks. And then maybe that's a thing you want to do, kind of earmark for later in the convention, so you can talk to people as you're going, right? In the earlier part of the convention, you can say, hey, are you doing anything Saturday night? I have a game I could run with space if you're interested, right? You can kind of, accrue people and get people to buy in so that you have something, for later in the con. And I wouldn't do too much of that because it takes a lot of prep to prepare a convention game, and you have to be prepared for, like, it's not going to happen, right? Be prepared for it's not going to happen. So bring something that's easy and that you're not going to be disappointed if it doesn't work. But so I did that, and so I went to the open gaming space on Saturday night to run this RPG for 4 people, and a massive amount of the space was taken up. They had completely cleared the tables and were, like, laid out on the floor. This giant chariot racing game, which I guess has been going on in Totalcon for years and years and years.
Yes.
And they do it over and over again. I have no idea what the hell that is. They were having a great time. They were pretty loud, and they're, like, laying on the floor, moving around these chariots and stuff. And I'm like, that looks awesome.
I see a
Here's the
lot
thing,
of promotions around Totalcon for a game. I believe it's called Carpe Diem. Is my
Yeah.
stab at it, because if I look online, there's like a surprising amount of Carpe Diem stuff tagged Totalcon. Someone feel free to correct me if I'm totally wrong about that impression. I like that though. It reminds me of when we were when you and I both went to GaryCon, and up until that point, Mike Carr was still running a giant "Don't Give Up the Ship" game um, in his bare feet on a huge section of the floor, wandering around, moving around 24 players' different ships according to their commands. So as folks know, I like a miniature wargaming experience. So that's totally the kind of thing that would attract me as well. And that you kind of need a convention to get that many people, right? I mean, I'm one of the fairly few people that actually like. I mean, our viewer Julian is in the same camp, but aside from Julian and me, I'm one of the few people that actually like running games for a dozen people or 20 people, if I can pull it off. And you kind of have to be at a convention in order to get that many people together.
Yep. Absolutely. And like I said, I think part of that is just needing the density of gamers, but part of that is relying on the fact that again, you've got people showing up with this mentality of play, right? And you've got people showing up who either didn't plan or their plans fell through. That happens too. Games get canceled. There was, I think, a comment in the chat about somebody listening to our show right now because their game got canceled. Sorry, friend.
Yep.
Sorry to hear that.
Evil Scientist, glad you could make it today. Thanks for joining in.
But
and let me,
happens, right?
Yes, totally. And let me just touch on a question from Adam here in the chat. So Adam Dravian's asking, have either of you actually played Don't Give Up the Ship, which is the Napoleon Civil War type era fighting ship game that's credited to Mike Carr and Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson, which was the first game they worked together on. So, Adam, I've played it exactly once at GaryCon with Mike Carr running it, and partly I wish that I have had more of a chance to play it. Apparently I came in with an unconventional strategy because Mike commented on it at some point. And it was a neat event because there was a lot of people hanging around, and just coincidentally, Mike Mornard, who's one of the first people to ever play D&D, was in the game, and John Peterson was hanging around. So at some point, I was just having a chat with Mike and John and some other people when Mike Carr called me over to my turn, and I had to grab my clipboard and run back. So I have really fond memories of all the times I played Don't Give Up the Ship, which is once.
I would say games like that too, the big games that require a lot of people, whether it's that or the RPG that Bill Webb ran at GaryCon that you and I played in, Dan. We got into one of those games intentionally and fell into the second one just because we went and they were talking about it and they're like, "Yep, we're doing this again tomorrow. You could come by," and we were like, "I guess we're doing that, right?" That's what we're doing now. So there's a fair amount of stuff like that happens on the fly. I would say a lot of those games, whether it's Car Wars or the chariot racing game or Don't Give Up the Ship, they kind of become traditions, right? Like I feel like a lot of conventions have these games where it's a big game, it's very open to people dropping in, and you need, right, like you said, it can only really be pulled off at a convention. And when they're successful, they become traditions, and they start becoming a thing that happens year after year after year at the convention. And that's great because that means people will remember this stuff. And so if you're brand new, or if you're trying to enjoy a convention on the fly, ask around about those things. What are the games that are run every year, yes, right? What game is run every year here? And you'll immediately get those games.
I like that advice a lot because actually there are frequently a number of flagship games at conventions that kind of give the flavor for that particular con, and that's actually a really good way if you're going to a con for the first time is get into some of those possibly big flagship games actually and kind of get a sense for the con. That's actually really good advice.
Yeah. And it's not always games. I'm thinking about having gone to Gen Con year after year, and one of the things I fell into that I really enjoyed was the auction. There's an auction at Gen Con, and that's super fun. I found, especially there's one set I can't remember. They organize the auction sort of by type of game, and there's one part of the auction that is like all the weird stuff. I can't remember what they call it, right? But it's the category that is all the stuff that doesn't fit into another category, right? So it's not RPGs, it's not board games, it's not miniatures, it's like the other weird stuff, and it's super fun. It's very entertaining to watch some of the weird things that can't go into one of those categories show up at a gaming convention auction.
Give me an example. Give me two examples.
Oh jeez. Oh man. Yeah, you're killing me. I don't remember. It's been a long time since I was at one of these things. But I don't know. I feel like there's like custom artwork. I remember somebody donated a bunch of like custom play mats for I don't know, maybe it's like an artist had made a bunch of custom play mats maybe for Magic or something like that. Had a lot of like just gorgeous, interesting artwork. And then there's also like maybe some esoteric, bizarro toy from the 80s that's very, like super old, like came out of somebody's dusty basement. That's like, is this a game? I mean, maybe technically. It's certainly weird and nostalgic and strange. But yeah, stuff like that. So just kind of weird toys and nice. Yeah. This is my memories are so hazy on this because you're talking about something that happened maybe at least 10 years ago. So.
I certainly remember because we also went to the auction at the charity auction at GaryCon, and I don't think I would have picked that myself, but it was like surprisingly interesting to see who was there donating stuff and what it was actually a surprisingly interesting experience. So I do agree with that. Something that I wouldn't have thought of going to a con the first time, but you're kind of in a central place, and there might be some of the important personalities of the con showing up there. So yeah, totally,
yeah. So I don't know. I think that stuff is fun. Yeah, definitely look for the traditions. Ask what the traditions of the con are.
Yeah.
Be prepared, I guess, and the I feel like the underlying theme I'm getting at here is be prepared to pretend to be an extrovert if you're not one already, right? Right? Because you have to talk to folks and find out what's going on. That's
okay. So I'm going to pull on a thread. I'm going to segue off that.
Yeah.
Really key advice. And I'm going to pick on a thread that our friend Hobo Ogre threw in the chat a little while back. So Hobo Ogre was saying to avoid such awkwardness, people you're meeting in person for the first time, when I go, I have to wear a button, caution, I'm a hugger. Let's just talk for a minute about hugging protocols. Okay. So yeah, I'm not right. So I'm not naturally, I don't know, I have large personal space normally, right? Historically. So as I, became an adult and became involved in, creative projects, I trained myself to be a hugger. That was not my normal thing, but I actually trained myself to be a hugger and be like, yeah, this is how I'm interacting with people. This is great. Showing people I'm happy to be with them, and I totally am. So I want to, communicate my honest feelings. And I trained myself to be a hugger. And I'm talking about, this is like a 20-year arc I'm talking about. Great. And then, time goes on, and then it becomes socially more important to be cognizant of people's consent to being hugged. And I actually had to start ramping it in the other direction and, ask people like, is it okay? Is it okay for me to hug you or something like that? And so over the course of my history, I've had to throw that dial in both directions, trying to communicate my honestly warm feelings when I get to hang out with somebody, and also their comfort level with that kind of thing. So what is the current hugging protocol these days, Paul? And I don't even know what's happened like pre-COVID, post-COVID. So that's a whole separate thing. So
I mean,
What should I be doing now, Paul?
Consent's important, and have a backup plan, I guess, right? Like if you're not a hugger, or which is totally reasonable, have a backup. Like if somebody says, "Hey, would you like a hug?" He's fine with like, "No, thanks. How about a fist bump?" Right? How about an elbow? Whatever. Some, or just say no thanks and be okay with that. I guess. I don't know. Is so Adam is asking, is hugging common at conventions? Um, uh, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if hugging is common at conventions or if hugging is simply common in the circles I travel in. I am definitely a hugger, and I know I've been going to this convention year after year, and the people that I associate with, many of them are huggers. So there's lots of hugging in my convention experience. I don't know that that's really associated with the convention. That might just be the people involved.
So certainly, like if you were going to your con for the first time, whichever way you personally feel about that, feel free, because it's not like there's a lot of unforced, a lot of undesired hugging going on at the same time. So people are generally very polite and try to be respectful of other people's boundaries. Certainly.
Yeah, for sure. You know what else? So more advice for going to a convention unprepared. Sorry, I don't know. This has nothing to do with hugging, but but do exchange information, especially if you had a good time. Had a good time at the table with someone. Exchange information. So you can look for them at future games.
Okay, Paul, in the past, right, has cards. He comes prepared with contact.
You actually have one here, right in my pocket.
Yeah. See, okay.
I was going to focus on this.
There you go. See that? And the first, I didn't know about this in advance, but I was with Paul at a convention, played a great game. Like, that was great. And I feel so great about the people around me. And Paul whips out his cards and goes, it's great to play with you. It's great to play with you. It's great to play with you. And I'm like, oh, F me. That's brilliant. I was like, you gotta be crapping me. That's amazing.
Yeah. Or what? I mean, it doesn't have to be cards. Cards is a little bit of an old school thing, right? And we're all worried about physical objects being passed around and touching and whatnot. But like, I don't know. I don't want to advise anyone to be like, give out your phone number to text, right? Because maybe that's weird. But there's so many messaging apps and whatnot out there these days. Like, have a way. Think about what works for you. Have a way to trade information with someone, and do it if you can. Because
I think the card. I mean, I will still.
If nothing else, let me say
cards.
this.
Yeah.
I like the card thing. I still carry them around. I don't think I gave out any this weekend, but I would say this, especially like if you're a player, if you're going strictly to play and you sit down at a game and the GM was awesome, write their name down. Write it down so that then you can go back and look at the schedule and find out what else is that person running. Or next year, if you come again or you go to another convention, you can look for that person. Keep a list of GMs you think are great who go to conventions. And that's a great way. That's frankly how when I am scheduling a con, when I'm actually on top of things and remember to sign up for games before the deadline, that's usually my first go-to, is to look for games run by people who I know are good. I will always say that the best, when a GM asks me what should I run, I say whatever you want, because the best game is the one that the GM is excited about. So if you know a GM is great, if I know a GM is great, I want to play in their game regardless of what they're running.
Interesting. I will still praise the cards, because the physical cards, because and at least the way that I saw Paul use them in the past was the game's wrapping up, right? You're in this state where people are getting up from the table and about to walk out of the room, and their hands are full and they're packing stuff, and the transaction is very fast, right? It's just like, here's the thing, it's in the stack of the rest of your papers, right? It's not taking any extra time. You don't have to mutually get your phones out and give me your phone number and ping and confirm that or anything like that. It's a zero time transaction. You don't have to depend on somebody else's phone device, platform, whatever. It's just like you figure out, if you want to get in touch with me, you figure this out. You figure this out later. So I thought, and you're waiting until the end of the game. You're not doing it at the start and giving contact information to a total bunch of randos. You're seeing if you have good chemistry with somebody before you hand out your contact info.
The downside to it is that it's unidirectional, right? You're not taking any information back. So I could hand out my card to 6 people at a con game, and they all leave. And am I going to hear from any of them? I don't know. Completely out of my control at that point. So
it's true. I feel I guess I've had this conversation with you and also Isabel in the past about that, actually. And I'm like, I don't know. I guess in some moral sense, I'm like, they have to make the choice. They probably weren't thinking about this before now, and I kind of actually want them to have the choice. I guess I bet Isabel's pushed me to be more get their contact info, but I'm comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with that protocol.
It's certainly better than nothing.
Yeah,
I will say that. Certainly better than just walk away and hope maybe I bump into you again. Because and the funny thing too is at a convention, even just day to day, like you're going to bump into a lot of people, and are you going to recognize them again later? Are you going to remember their name? I mean, most of us are wearing badges with their name on it, but still, right? Like, yeah, I think it's. I guess just be prepared for it. Think about it critically. Think about what you're comfortable with. Again, my card has all it has on it is a URL and an email address, which is one that I don't mind giving to people. Right, it's a bit more public than I'm not giving anyone my cell phone number. I'm not giving anyone my personal email address. It's actually all my stuff that can be found on my blog very easily.
Yeah. 2 interesting comments. So WL Denning here in the chat is saying at ReaperCon, which is not something I've been to, ReaperCon, there's a big ribbon culture that people make them and you can stick them on your badge, which is really, really interesting tradition for that. And Josh had one edit to Paul's cards there. Hopefully I can get this up. Josh, you're saying on your card, Paul, you should have a space to write it was rolls a d20. Nice to play with you.
The thing is, if it was a 1, you don't get a card. So,
I assume you're fudging it. I assume that... I assume the DM is fudging that particular roll. Also, 1d20. What kind of new school woke mechanic is that? It should be 2d6 like an original D&D. Jeez, I don't know what's happening. Can't believe I actually just said that. I apologize for saying that.
I don't know. Yeah.
Thank you. Evil Scientist is agreeing with me on that. Definitely, it should be 2d6.
Yeah. It was a roll again time with you. It was a. It was a neutral time.
It was hostile.
It was hostile. A hostile game with you. Oh goodness.
That is some funny stuff. Oh, good Lord. Let me just say that in the so I've gone to Totalcon in the past with Paul. I didn't for kind of work time purposes. I didn't get an opportunity to do that this week. I should point out that I tried to, for those of for viewers that have been waiting for me to get back to the Elder Times stream and play more Pool of Radiance. I tried to do that Thursday night and had a technical problem that barred me from doing that. And software systems nowadays are surprisingly unpredictable, because I was playing Pool of Radiance on the Steam network, and Pool of Radiance has been on Steam for about a year at this point, dependably, reliably, week after week, up until the end of December. And I even played it, I've actually played a little bit of practice offline about a month ago, and I get on Thursday night and the Steam will not start up Pool of Radiance or any of the Gold Box games.
Weird.
So I had to cancel it on Thursday, and it took me about an hour of debugging to realize that I had to change my graphic settings on Steam. So planning on being back for that a week from Thursday. Should be March 9th for folks that are waiting for that. So it's currently running. I don't know what's happening with modern operating systems that change all my settings around. I did not change anything, so apologies for anybody that was waiting for that on Thursday. We will be back with that in the future. And I will say, last week, Paul, in our discussion of the history of Wizards, digital D&D software stuff, you were mentioning the Gold Box DM's Assistance, which is called Unlimited Adventures. Did I get their name right?
I thought it was just called DM's Assistant.
Oh, really? Okay. All right. So for what it's worth, in the package, in the Gold Box package on Steam, you get Pool of Radiance and Hills of Ilfar and Curse of the Azure Bonds, and there is an assistant called Unlimited Adventures that I actually have as part of that package that I hadn't booted up yet. So maybe I'll take a look at that and report back on what that particular product was like. And again, I think that, like we were saying last week, I think that's clearly a product that was part of the software tooling to the Gold Box games, and somebody said we could just release this as a product itself. And so maybe I should dig into that, because that is not something I've used in the past.
Yeah, I'll be curious to hear what you find out, because I'm not totally convinced it's exactly the same thing. The thing I'm talking about, it had artwork on it that looked remarkably, or was just directly stolen from the DM's guide, first edition DM's guide, with the guy in the green cloak with the big doors.
Well, right, that would be the second printing, and I think that's what they also used. I think they also use it for this. So
you're good. Okay. Great. Okay. Well, I'm curious to see what you find out.
Yeah. Right. So it's an interesting product. If someone is on Steam, you get a lot of stuff from those. I think there's actually two separate Gold Box collections, but between the two of them, they have everything that was ever released for AD&D under the Gold Box line. So a lot of stuff yet to come on Elder Times, for instance. So Paul, this weekend, how many? Just give me a proportion of how many games did you get in that were pre-scheduled tables that you walked up to versus games that you yourself threw together on an ad hoc basis?
So I was there from Friday morning through this morning. I didn't play anything today because, of course, I wanted to get back here and do this. So it was really just there for 2 days. I was there from all day Friday and all day Saturday to play games. And I got into one game of a pre-scheduled game where I just showed up and said, "Hey, can I join?" And I did. No, 2 if I count Car Wars. Sorry, I wasn't counting Car Wars. I got into 2. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. And then I also, like I said, I brought. It also helps that I knew, I spent some time before going connecting with people who I knew were also going to find other people who were in a similar boat to myself, of which there were some, right? It's not zero, but I contacted other friends and found other friends who were like, "Are you going to Totalcon? Do you have plans?" etc. And I kind of, I focused in on I'm going to bring this one. I brought a scenario for Fearful Ends that I could run. And I just contacted other friends and I said, "I'm going to try and run this Saturday night if you're available." And managed to, between that and then just networking on site, had 4 players by the time Saturday night rolled around, which was great.
Smart. Super smart. Nice. So over about, I guess Friday, Saturday, there'd be about six total standard game slots. So that's a good. That's a good job.
I didn't play 6 games.
Understood. Again, understood.
Personally, I value a lot the social atmosphere. So I do spend time at night after the last game, hanging out at the bar or going hang out with friends and chatting, which I really enjoy. Which means I'm not getting up for the morning game. I would say I played a total of 5 games I did get in that one board game through the board game library on Friday morning, but Saturday morning I slept and I visited the exhibit hall and I did other things in the morning and only played 2 games on Saturday.
Yeah, that's the appropriate thing to do. I wouldn't do any better than that, I don't think. So
Yeah.
that's about what you want. Yeah, cool. Cool. Well done. And I join in several of our viewers for saying thanks for getting online this morning when it was a little bit unclear about whether Paul was actually going to be able to do that.
I certainly. I'm hoping that I've just really worn out my voice, but we'll see. I'll test and keep an eye on it and make sure that I'm not out there infecting anyone. And apologies to anyone who went to Totalcon who hung out with me. Hope you don't get the crud.
So sometimes I come away from a con, and all of us talk about this, and I feel run down. I've got the con crud, and other times I feel high as a kite. Sometimes I come away from a con, and at least there's a 3 in 6 chance that I feel better than any other time in my life, which I believe some of the LARPer community refer to as post-con charisma, I think. And I've 100%. I have absolutely come away from cons, and at least like through Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, feel that I can look right into people's souls and know what they're thinking. It's like really creepy. In your much greater experience, what's the ratio breakdown of that? Like for you, how often do you come away from a con feeling better than before versus feeling run down?
I've almost always feel run down. I have a strong, maybe I'm burning the candle on both ends every time I go to the conventions. Maybe because again, I like to hang out late into the night and socialize, and then still manage to scrape myself out of bed the next morning and do more stuff. And after like 2 or 3 days of that, it's a lot. Traditionally, in the past, I used to always take the Monday after a convention off from work, just so I could be like, I'm gonna spend a day sleeping in and doing laundry and any other self-care I can do to recover, because I know I am going to be destroyed, which is, and I don't regret it. I know, for any given convention, you get to go once a year. You're only going to get to have that experience so many times, right? Time is limited. So I don't regret spending that time. I super enjoy it, and I'm willing to pay the price of maybe feeling a little run down, maybe wearing down my immune system to the point where something manages to grab hold of me.
Sounds like time well spent. Sounds like resources, so. And we have finite resources, and we got to think very carefully when we expend them. And it sounds like that's a good adventure on which to expend them.
Well, Dan, we are about out of time. Do you have any final thoughts on unplanned, making the most out of an unplanned convention?
I appreciate your insights, because between the two of us, Paul, you're very much the greater expert on going to conventions. So I've appreciated the times where you've led the way, and I personally find your advice very helpful when I'm planning to going to a con. So. Again, thanks for getting online this morning, this afternoon, and sharing your experiences fresh when the memory is fresh from this weekend.
When the memory is fresh, there you go. Yeah, happy to. I think it's super fun. I definitely recommend folks go to conventions if you've never been. Go check one out. It's great. Even the big ones. I know we kind of focused in on the small ones here because that's what I'm just coming from. I think the big ones are worth it as well. It's a kind of a different experience. It's not my preference, but I would say it's worth going at least once just to witness the spectacle, because it is amazing going to one of those. 100%. So definitely, I would say check it out. And if you can do some pre-planning, not a bad idea, because the thing is, stuff changes on site anyway, right? I remember I used to go to conventions and they would have a booklet, a print booklet of like all the events that are going on. And the convention I just went to doesn't do that anymore. And I would be surprised if more and more we see conventions pulling back from that, because they're preferring online services, which can be updated, because things change a lot. Some of your games are going to get canceled. Some of, life happens, right? So even if you go with a great planned experience, something's probably going to change in the middle, and that's okay. Roll with the punches. Be prepared to have to make the most of an unexpected chunk of time off.
I'm glad you told me about that, Paul, as a final thought, actually, because I would have been very surprised at not having a paper catalog to a con. So actually, that's really critical advice for me to be aware of, actually. And I totally concur. I over plan and over prepare. So going to cons, I have frequently made really elaborate spreadsheets of prioritizations and this and that, and feed them together, and then get there and something blows it up, and all of a sudden my master plan has in fact not survived initial contact with the convention. Totally.
I can't say I've ever been to a convention and gone through exactly the schedule that I had pre-planned. Even when I planned it super carefully, something in that is going to break or change, and it's fine. Go with it. Have a good time. Enjoy your time. Go to the convention with a priority on play, and you will have a good time.
And I'll just leave the last chat here from Adam saying, having never been to an RPG con, this was super informative. Adam, took me a long time. I highly recommend it. You should try it. Go as a player 1 year, like Paul's saying, maybe a second year. Think, once you know the lay of the land, consider running your own games. And you should try it. It is a major part of gaming culture. It's not for everybody, but it's a good thing to try out.
It is.
Definitely.
It is the birthplace of some of our activities, right? Like Gen Con pre-exists Dungeons and Dragons, right? Dungeons and Dragons came about because the creators went to Gen Con. So
yes,
yeah,
exactly, 100%. And you get to experience those big games we were talking about that only exist there.
Oh yeah.
Whole bunch of stuff.
If any of our viewers have other thoughts, ideas about how to make the most out of a convention that you find yourself at with no plans, please leave us a comment here in the video. I'm sure other viewers would love to hear your words of wisdom. I'm curious to see them. I'm curious what I may have missed, and maybe that'll spawn new conversations down the road.
Definitely, and or maybe meetups at conventions later this year. And of course, remember, if you're new to the Wandering DMs channel, you can like, follow, and subscribe to us. We are on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, GitHub, TikTok. We do have the handle Wandering DMs on all those sites, so please follow us there, and you get updates on upcoming shows.
If you prefer to listen to our show in audio-only podcast format, those podcasts are available on our website at wanderingdms.com. They're also available through various podcast carriers such as Google Podcasts, Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher. If you're listening to this show right now on one of those sites and that site offers the ability to do so, please rate and review us on that site. That helps other users of that site find us, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, we really do. And of course, big thanks to our patrons who support the Wandering DMs channel. If you'd like to join them, please visit patreon.com/wanderingdms, and you'll see the couple different tiers we have at Patreon, different benefits there. Like Paul said at the top of the show, every single tier gives you access to our private Discord server, where we continually have ongoing chat. And one of our favorite parts every week is the after chat, where we continue the conversation live on video there on Discord. Now, I'm making the executive decision to bench Paul for today. I think Paul needs a break so for his voice here. So I'm benching Paul for today, but I'll be there on the after chat in about 10 minutes. I hope that's okay, Paul.
Yeah, I think tea and honey is on order for me for the next bit. So appreciate it.
Definitely. I'll say upcoming on this week, this Thursday, March 2nd, I think, Dan Cullinan or Gamma Dan and I will be back for another session of Book of War on Thursday. And I don't know what's going to happen there, because we've been ramping up the higher level units over the last couple of weeks, and we introduced high-level fighters, lords, and then dragons, and then wizards. And so as of this Thursday, for the first time, we're just going to uncork everything that I've got on the lists. So I have no idea what kinds of, last week we had magic spells that were moving terrain around the board and zapping pawns right out of existence and stuff like that. So I have no idea what's going to show up on Thursday. And one of the interesting things is that, and this was the point of live streaming that in the first place, is that we are getting to test some of the high level material in D&D that I think traditionally, classically hasn't been tested that much. And on our Discord server, all in the last week, we had a wonderful conversation with everybody that's watching about ideas for refining, fine-tuning, looking at those top, highest level elements in classic D&D is of wizards and elementals and dragons and all kinds of stuff like that. And we've been ping-ponging a lot of really great ideas for fine-tuning that high-level stuff. And I am really, really excited about those conversations on Discord at the moment and seeing what we can do for the Book of War game on Thursday. So hopefully folks will tune in that and get on our Discord and share your ideas about how to make the high-level D&D game as good as it can be. Anything else I'm forgetting, Paul? I think that's probably enough for this week, right?
Yeah, I think that's plenty.
Cool. So we'll be back next Sunday once we recover and all get our voices back. Don't forget that we are live every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. So please join us again next week for another thought-provoking discussion.
We'll see you then.